Hi there, students. I'm XS. That's little x, little s, which stands for extra sweet, because that's what I am. So I'm going to treat this next section of videos as my Unit 2. We have learned a lot, actually. When you think about it, if you've been following my video lessons closely, then we've already learned hiragana, katakana, a handful of kanji, a primer on how Japanese verbs work, and the basics of Japanese adjective conjugation. That really is a lot, and I'm amazingly proud of you for doing so well. So if this is our Unit 2, then before we start any new content, I want to talk to you just a little bit about my goals and future plans. When I started this channel, my intent was to create a classroom series, and it was my assumption that each of my videos would create kind of a sequential course that would help you to learn Japanese over time. What I realized really quickly is that I think a lot of you might actually prefer that my classes aren't organized in such a way that you're sort of forced to watch everything in order. Now, I admit, I'm still new to all of this, and I'm still finding my feet. I want to try out some different things. My goal has never really changed for anything that I'm putting out in my channel. I really want to inform, educate, and entertain. And I want to inspire you. I want to make you smile. And I hope that I do that in my silly little way. I really hope that I'm approaching the learning process in such a way that you're finding it beneficial. But I also see that maybe some things need to change. I'm thinking about how I want to present my lessons, and I'm trying to move into a style where my lessons aren't necessarily sequential anymore. That's part 2 of my grand plan. Part 1 of my grand plan is actually something that I've already been in the process of making happen. I've decided to split my channel on YouTube into 2 parts. I'm now going to have 2 channels. This channel is going to focus specifically on my Japanese language content, while my other new channel, youtube.com/@Puppy-Sensei-plays, is going to focus on my gaming, streaming, and Pathfinder content. My concern has always been that I really didn't want my channel to end up feeling too bloated. So now, if what you're into is Japanese, then you know that you can watch my videos here. And if you're more interested in my gaming content, then by all means, check me out on my new channel. Manager-sama, can we get a link to the new channel? There it is. I know that that channel is going to be pretty empty right now, but we're going to post a bunch of VODs and clips and more stuff there soon, so just stay tuned. Plus, Puppy-Sensei's Pathfinder Apocalypse starts in January. I'm so happy that I've been able to do that through my sponsorship of the school's pen and paper gaming club. Anyway, moving on. So today we're going to learn all about na-adjectives. We're going to learn everything there is to know about na-adjectives today, and I hope you're so excited to learn all about na-adjectives. So let's get into it. Ikimashou! Ah, it feels like forever since we've been in this room, doesn't it? I hardly recognize the place. Maybe it's that pesky ghost. Anyway, the last time that we had a lesson, we were discussing Japanese adjectives. I gave you a definition in Japanese for the word adjective, and that's this word, keiyoshi. Now, technically speaking, keiyoshi is actually the word for an e-adjective. And what's an e-adjective? Well, I taught you this concept through the framework of colors in Japanese. I said that there are 5 colors that commonly get used as e-adjectives, and those are aoi, blue, akai, red, kuroi, black, shiroi, white, and kiroi, yellow. What do we see in all of these? We see a kanji, and then we see e, right? With these words, you should notice a pattern that's similar to the Japanese verbs that we've learned so far. You've got kanji that are carrying some meaning, and then you've got a little bit at the end, in this case e, and that's what's going to conjugate in order to carry some grammatical information for the word. This is a point that I've made before, but at the risk of repeating myself, here's a grammar point, okay? With Japanese, we often see a pattern where words are expressed through a combination of kanji that carry meaning, and then conjugations using hiragana that express some kind of grammatical form for those words. For a start, we're going to see this pattern with almost all verbs and all adjectives. Nouns do not follow this pattern because nouns don't conjugate, which is why most nouns are written usually just in kanji or katakana. When a lot of my students are new to Japanese, they can feel really intimidated by the way Japanese uses multiple writing systems all within the same sentence. But actually, what I want to show you is that this can actually be a really beneficial thing when we're trying to read longer sentences. Let me show you what I mean. So here's a sentence, right? I'm not going to read it out to you just yet, but I really like to think that the Japanese language, it kind of functions in terms of sentences containing lots of slots that get filled by various words and different grammatical concepts. So I want to try to find the slots for this sentence. The first one that we could find is always going to be the verb, right? That'll be the easiest thing for us to find. For Japanese sentences, the verb is always at the end. Honestly, I should really say almost always, because there are some rare cases and rare reasons that we might have some weird situation where there is no verb or something like that. But yeah, for almost all sentences, we're going to find the verb at the end of a sentence. And in finding the verb, we can actually work backwards from the very end of the sentence, right? So here's our sentence, and we're going to start working backwards. The first thing that we see highlighted here is the end of the sentence, which is mashita. We know that that's a verbal suffix. It's a verb ending, meaning what? You know, don't you? It's the past tense polite verb ending. It's an affix, which means it's technically part of the verb. And that means that whatever verb we have in this sentence is in the past tense and it's polite. Great. So, well then what's the verb? Let's keep working backward until we hit a kanji, because we know that most Japanese verbs are going to have a little bit of kanji and a little bit of hiragana, right? Working backward from the end of the sentence then, we land upon kakimashita. Now, I want you to imagine that you have no idea what kakimashita means. Maybe you don't. But by working backward from the end of the sentence, you already know two things about kakimashita, even without knowing the meaning. You know that it's a verb, and you know that it's in the polite past tense. That's actually pretty cool, and it's something that you can't necessarily do with a language like English. When you see a brand new word in English, it isn't always super easy to make assumptions about what that word is at all. Sometimes you can, and linguistics teaches us things like the WUG test, which is a way that you can guess at the grammatical roles played by made-up or brand new words. Japanese removes some of that guesswork because words frequently follow a very predictable pattern. Here's another grammar point. There are some simple set rules with Japanese grammar that relate to the use of kanji in combination with hiragana and katakana that actually make Japanese interestingly predictable, and that's quite cool. Verbs always follow a set pattern. Nouns can be a little tougher to nail down, but usually they're going to be written entirely in kanji or katakana, depending on their origin. And then we can actually determine even more about a sentence when we have a really firm foundation for the use of particles. Let's take a look. So this sentence is, 火曜日の夜にマネージャー様は美味しいラーメンを作った. Now, we can use the particles in this sentence, which I've highlighted for you here, to determine the slots that are being filled within the sentence, can't we? Right? 作った. That means to make. That's our verb. And what's being made? The thing immediately prior to the o particle, 美味しいラーメン, which is delicious ramen. And who is making that ramen? Well, the thing immediately prior to our topic particle wa, which is manager-sama. And when were they making it? Well, our ni particle gives us that information. Kayobi no yoru, which means Friday night. Okay, let's move back to our other sentence here and continue under the assumption that you don't know the meaning of kakimashita. We already know that kakimashita is a verb and it's in the polite past tense. And the next thing in the sentence right before kakimashita is the particle o, right? O is the object particle. It can be used in cases where you've done something to something, or sometimes you've done something with something. It often answers the question, what? As in, what did you do? Well, in this case, o is taking this tiny little word, bun. Okay, again, let's assume that you don't know this kanji, you don't know this word, you don't know what bun means. We still know something, because we know that this is likely to be a noun. We know that it's likely to be a noun because it doesn't have any kind of ending that could be conjugated. It's basically a lone kanji in the middle of a sentence, and it's marked with the object particle o. So, this specific sentence fragment, right, this is bun o kakimashita, it has to mean some verb in the past tense was done to something. Even if we don't know the verb, and even if we don't know the object, we still know that there's a noun that acts as the object of the sentence, and there's a verb in the past polite form that interacts directly with that object. We don't yet know who the doer of the verb is, but we know that there must be one, and we know that Japanese is perfectly content not having a doer of the verb spelled out explicitly for us, if we can easily infer who did the thing. But that's not super important right now. Let's keep going, okay? We're actually now going to skip to the front of the sentence. We have our verb. We have the object of the verb. Let's see if there's a topic or a subject particle. That would be wa or ga. And we can spot wa very easily in this sentence, right? So, the topic of our sentence, and almost certainly the doer of the verb, is Puppy-Sensei. It me! We've already filled out 3 slots within our sentence. Take a look. Without knowing anything else about the sentence, we know that Puppy-Sensei did something to something. And now, finally, we're going to focus on any of the middle bit that still exists within the sentence, whatever might be between wa and our object. And in this case, that's this part right here. Fukuzatsu na. Let's imagine for a moment that we have never seen these kanji and that we really aren't that sure what na is or means in this case. Well, then we have 2 options that we can select from. Either A, Fukuzatsu is a noun and na is some new particle that we haven't learned before, or B, Fukuzatsu na is altogether something different. It's one unit, and based on everything that we know about Japanese so far, that means Fukuzatsu means something, and na is part of that word and serves as an anchor for conjugation, right? We can see that because we see kanji, kanji, na. And we can assume, therefore, that the Fukuzatsu part can't conjugate, the na part might be able to conjugate, right? That's just an assumption. In reality, I'm actually going to ruin the punchline here. It's actually sort of both. Fukuzatsu is a na-adjective, and that's going to be the topic of our lesson today. But even before we've learned na-adjectives, let's take a look at how much we can already determine about our sentence because we know kanji, and we know hiragana, and we know how they interact with one another. That's the point that I was trying to make here, that we can actually figure out the framework of a sentence by understanding how kanji and hiragana work in tandem. Find the verb by following the hiragana at the end of the sentence until we hit 1 or 2 or 3 kanji, right? Find nouns by spotting kanji or kanji compounds or katakana that are alone within a sentence. No hiragana between the kanji and the following particle probably means that what we're dealing with is a noun, particularly if it's immediately before the o particle or immediately before the wa particle, because we know that those are typical noun slots in a sentence. We can also find the subject or the topic by finding whatever's before the wa or ga particle, right? So just by knowing particles, by knowing how kanji work, by knowing how hiragana works, we can kind of figure out the parts of a sentence just intuitively, and that's pretty cool. Now, I want to do some sensei magic here because I'm actually going to dramatically change our understanding of this sentence and its meaning with just one simple definition. Bun means sentence. Not like a prison sentence, but like a grammatical sentence. Let's ignore fukuzatsu na for a moment. In fact, I'm just going to temporarily remove it so that we're focusing just on the stuff that we certainly know. And that leaves us with this sentence. Puppy-Sensei wa bun o kakimashita. Now, let's remember how often I've said that Japanese is highly driven by context and by context clues. If you can figure something out within a sentence, that'll help you out a whole lot, and it doesn't necessarily need to be spelled out by content alone. So, if bun means sentence, then Puppy-Sensei did something to a sentence. And if you really think about it, even without knowing the verb kakimashita, there really are only a very small handful of things that kakimashita could possibly mean, right? It's almost certainly either read a sentence or wrote a sentence. You probably can't eat a sentence. You really can't take a walk with a sentence. You can't bite it, you can't lick it, you can't wear it. I suppose you could enjoy a sentence, you could cherish it or translate it, you could appreciate it, you could hate it, but a good 90% of the time, you could probably guess that you're either going to be reading a sentence or you're going to be writing a sentence. This is actually another linguistic concept called concordance. Concordance is when words really frequently appear with one another, so you could guess what's coming next, right? So when I say cell, you might assume that the next word I'm going to say is phone, cell phone. Cell phone are words that commonly appear together. This is actually how predictive text works with AI. I know AI is a little bit scary, but let's not be scared of it for just a moment, and we'll talk about it. When you start typing into your phone and your phone suggests something to you, it's giving you the most common words that it thinks you're likely to want to use next. It's saying, oh, you started a sentence with you, so the next word is probably going to be will or want or ate, something, right? It thinks, here are the words that you often use immediately after this word that you just used. Well, that's actually how our brains work too. I know that we're really getting into the linguistic weeds here today, but I really want to expand our brains for a second and really think about something that our heads do naturally. So let's look at this English sentence. What does this sentence mean? I'm going at 10:30. When you hear this sentence, the very immediate assumption that you might have is that you're going to leave somewhere at 10:30 a.m. or p.m., right? That's because 10:30 is a common time of the day. But does it have to mean that? Isn't it possible that maybe 10:30 could be a score, right? It's 1030, and maybe I'm playing a game, and as soon as I reach that score of 1030, I'm going to stop playing. At that point, I'm going away. I'm going to stop playing at 1030. And is it maybe feasible that like 1030 is somebody's weird nickname? So there's this outside, unlikely, but entirely possible interpretation of the sentence that means I'm going to fight someone named 1030. Sure, those are possible, but usually if you see the sentence, I'm going at 10:30, you can make some really, really good guesses that means I'm leaving somewhere at 10:30 as a time, right? We can do the same thing with Japanese. That is to say that most of the time, if we're doing something to a sentence, as in the sentence, Puppy-Sensei wa bun o kakimashita, then most likely what we're doing to that sentence is reading it or writing it. Are there other interpretations? Yeah, sure. But it's going to be true 9 out of 10 times that this quote-unquote unknown verb kakimashita means to read or to write the sentence. We can deduce and reason things about the sentence that we don't even know using context clues and our knowledge of the framework of the Japanese sentence. We know what verbs look like, and we know that they appear at the end of the sentence. We know what nouns look like. We know the common particles. We know about e-adjectives. We know the first part of a Japanese sentence is usually the doer of the sentence if it contains a wa or ga particle toward the beginning. So, kaku actually does mean to write. We had a 50-50 shot, basically. Let's bring back our whole entire sentence here. Puppy-Sensei wa fukuzatsu na bun o kakimashita. Puppy-Sensei wrote, past tense, remember, because mashita, a sentence. And then fukuzatsu. Well, that fukuzatsu na part comes immediately before bun, right? And because it's coming immediately before a noun, we can reason that it's modifying the noun. I can confirm that fukuzatsu means complicated. So, Puppy-Sensei wrote a complicated sentence, and the fukuzatsu na, it's taking na so that it can attach to bun, because fukuzatsu on its own is actually a noun. So fukuzatsu plus na becomes a na-adjective. Really, the sentence actually wasn't all that complicated when we broke it down and we started to try to understand the slots within the sentence. Now, let's do all this again. This time, I really want you to stretch your muscles a bit and try this mostly on your own. I'm not even going to give you the pronunciations right away because I want you to try your best just to find the bare bones form of this sentence. Okay, here it is. Oh my gosh. That's a lot of kanji, isn't it? Or is it? Let's use the same skills that we used last time. First, we're going to find the verb. Where is it? Hopefully you found it. It's this one. Do you know the word yomu? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but we know it's most likely going to be in the plain present form, don't we? Because it ends in the u sound that isn't mas. Okay? And here's the object. It's marked immediately before the particle o, right? Now, exactly as we did before, we're going to find the wa or the ga particle. That's probably the doer of our sentence, isn't it? Okay, we found it. Here it is. Unfortunately, it's not just a simple noun, is it? Right? We have something in katakana immediately before the wa. And that's probably a noun because words in katakana are often nouns. And then the previous bit is some kanji plus e. Kanji plus e, that looks exactly like an e adjective, right? That's the exact format that we would expect for an e adjective, and it's coming immediately before a noun, right? So this entire unit all together is acting as the topic for a sentence, and it's an e adjective describing a noun. This is important to remember. The wa in the sentence, the topic, is the adjective and the noun together, right? So that just leaves this little bit next. Let's assume that you have no idea what this mess means. What do we actually see? We see kanji, 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 and then the hiragana na. And we've talked a little bit about na-adjectives. Immediately after the na is a noun. And we said that that was the object of the sentence. So again, we can assume that this segment must likely be a na-adjective that's modifying that object. And assuming that, we actually already have the bones of this sentence. I like bones. Do you see how we got here? We have an E adjective describing some noun in katakana. The verb is at the end and it's in the plain form, so it's present tense. That verb is being done to or on some object. And that object is being described using a na adjective. So we've got adjective E, noun, wa, adjective na, noun, o, verb in the plain form. The very basic framework of meaning for our sentence is going to be something like this. Some kind of something does something with some kind of something. I know that doesn't sound like it means anything, but I find it really interesting that we can already understand so much about the roles of the words within the sentence and what they might be doing even without providing any definitions for those words. Well, in order to understand the sentence, let's start finding some definitions. You might do this by looking things up in a dictionary, right? You might go online. I personally really like gshow.org. It's a dictionary online that you can find, and it's really helpful, right? But in this case, because you're watching a video and I'm narrating that video for you, why don't I just give you the definitions instead of making you look them up online, okay? So we're going to start with our object, right? That object is hon. Let's assume that you might know the meaning of hon. It means book. So if the object of the sentence is book, then we might even be able to guess the meaning of the verb, right? What things do we do with a book? You can write a book, but we just saw the verb to write. We saw kakimashita, which is the polite past of the plain form kaku, right? So this verb, yomu, probably doesn't mean to write because it's not kaku, ne? What other things do you probably do with a book? Well, you could read a book, and that's probably what we're saying here. Sure, you could eat a book, you could translate it, you could buy a book. There are a lot of things that you could do with a book, but the most likely thing that you would do usually with a book is to read it, especially if you're not writing it. So let's assume that the verb here is to read, which it is, by the way. Let's move back to the topic, everything before wa. We can probably figure out the katakana just by sounding it out. Sarariman, a salaryman. You might know this word, perhaps, but in Japanese, a salaryman is some kind of basic business employee. It's an office worker, something like that. And immediately before that katakana word is an E adjective that tells us what kind of businessman we're talking about. Well, that's a bit harder to guess, isn't it? It could be a serious businessman, a hard-working businessman. There are actually lots of words that you could use to describe a businessman. So that's when we need to use our dictionaries in some way, right? We're going to have to look this word up. So I'll go ahead and tell you that this word is wakai. And wakai means young. So look at the progress that we've already made on understanding our sentence, right? We have a young salaryman. We have whatever this mess of kanji is in the middle. And we have hon, which means book. And we have to read, we assume. That just leaves us that final bit in the middle. Those 3 kanji plus na. If you look it up, you would find that that means fushigi na. I'll go ahead and tell you that fushigi means mysterious, weird, bizarre, strange in some way. So now we should have a fully fleshed out understanding of this entire sentence, don't we? It means a young salaryman reads a mysterious book. And do you see how we got there? By piece being able to slowly define words, based on our understanding of the role that they play within a sentence. We can find where the verb is, we can find where the nouns are, we can find where the adjectives are, and that gives us the ability to define things very, very carefully and simply, right? So, what do we see here? If we hone in, we see 不思議な, which, like I said, is a na-adjective, and that's going to be the topic for today's lesson. So, well, wait. Hold on though. I haven't actually gotten to na-adjectives yet. That was supposed to be the topic today. Are they really? Okay. Well then, I guess maybe I'm just gonna need to jump right to the quiz. I'm sorry, everyone. I said I was gonna teach you na-adjectives, and instead I just talked about silly stuff like how to read sentences. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess it shows the process that I use when I translate something. I guess it's like how I go about reading new sentences when I see words that I don't know, and if I've never seen that word in Japanese before, how I figure out what role it's playing in the sentence, and I guess that's useful for something. Maybe. Really? Wag. Okay. I got lied to. There was no dog toy store. We went to the vet. But I did get ice cream. Anyway, let's do a quiz. Today's content was all about being able to figure out sentences based on our ability to guess the grammatical functions of words within a sentence. My intent was to show you that we can make reasonable guesses about the content of a sentence using our knowledge of the typical forms taken by words. So that's what I want to do for today's quiz as well. I'm going to show you a sentence, and what I'm hoping that you can do is to find the specific word type based on the grammatical role that it's filling within the sentence. For example, if I were to show you this sentence, 赤い教科書があります, and then ask you to find the adjective in the sentence, I'm hoping that you'll be able to see that it's akai. The meaning of the rest of the sentence doesn't really matter, so it's okay to me if you don't know that kyokasho means textbook, for example. I only want to know that you can find and identify akai and know that it's an adjective. And how do we know that it's an adjective? Because it ends in an E sound and it comes immediately before a noun, that noun that it's modifying. Let's use what we do know to figure out what we can, even about the things that we don't know. So here we go. Let's get into it. 眠い猫はふわふわなソファの上に休んだ. There are probably parts of this sentence that you might not know, but that's okay. This should be very easy. All I want you to do here is find the verb. Read the sentence, find the verb. Simple, right? So what's the verb in this sentence? That's a verb meaning to rest, to lounge, to take a break, something like that. And we also know that it's in the past tense plain form. This sentence means the sleepy kitty rested on the fluffy sofa. This one is a little bit more difficult. 水曜日まで印象深いクリスマスツリーを買わなければなりません. It's a tough sentence, and there's quite a bit here that you might not know. It might be new to you, but your task isn't so hard. All I want you to do is to find the single E adjective in this sentence. There's only one. Can you find it? Inshobukai. I know that was almost certainly a new word for you. It means striking or impressive. And how could we know that that was an E adjective? Well, the objective noun in the sentence, which was marked by O, is Christmas tree. And moving backward from that, we can see some kanji, kanji, and then the e, right? And that follows the pattern of an e adjective, which modifies Christmas tree. By the way, this sentence means, I have until Wednesday to buy an impressive Christmas tree. That was a tough one, wasn't it? What about doing another easy one, okay? 1月にパピ先生の新しいシリーズを始まるようです。Simple question here. There is a timely reference in this sentence. When is it taking place? That's too easy. It's 1月. That means January. And we know that it's a timely reference because it's marked with ni and it's at the beginning of a sentence. 1月 is a noun, and a noun at the beginning of a sentence that's marked by ni is very likely to be either a timely reference or perhaps a destination. Okay, I admit this was mostly a shameless plug for my new series starting in January, since this sentence means it seems like a new Puppy-Sensei series is starting in January. Like and subscribe! Let's do one more for today, okay? We can see the verb at the end of this sentence. It's tabemashita. That verb means to eat. Past tense, as you know. But here's my question for you. What got eaten? Can you figure it out? One specific thing was eaten in this sentence, and I want to see if you can find it. Don't worry about what kind of or anything like that. I just want you to identify the noun that was eaten. Oh yeah, and I'm not reading the sentence out for you this time. You have to read it by yourself. How did you do? Did you find cheese? This was a very stuffed full sentence. I'm going to break it down for you. 冷蔵庫 means refrigerator. So 冷蔵庫の中の cheese is the cheese in the fridge. 鼻持ちならない is a phrase that means stinky. In this case, it's an adjective in the continuative form, the nakute form, because it's immediately followed by keredomo, which means however, or even still, or but. And the rest of the sentence is inu wa tabemashita. Right? Inu wa tabemashita. The dog ate it, past tense. And so all of these parts put together, the cheese in the fridge was stinky, and even still, the dog ate it. Gross. So how did you do? What did you think about this quiz format? Is this helpful? Let me know in the comments. Well, I guess we never did get to talk about na-adjectives, did we? We'll save it for next week. I know this lesson was very different from how I usually structure my lessons, but I'm really hoping that it helped to reframe the way that you've been thinking about Japanese sentences. For me, it was very helpful to start thinking about Japanese sentences in this way. It's all about kind of filling in the slots within a sentence, knowing where the verb is, knowing where the adjectives are, knowing where the object is, knowing where the subject is. If we know all of these things, not only does that make us a lot better as translators because we can understand the sentence a lot better within a certain framework, but ultimately it's also going to help you when you start writing your own Japanese sentences because you'll understand better the grammatical features within the language, and that really lets you kind of flesh out exactly what it is that you want to say and be understood within the sentence. So I know grammar can feel a little bit scary, but I think this is a way to reframe it in a way that makes it a little bit more manageable. Next time we really will talk about na-adjectives, so I really hope that I can see you then. Lead with love, everybody. I've been XS. I'll see you later. Mata ne.